my earliest memory was probably early college. My best friend since we were 12, Jeff, made me read this book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. Now, I was a little bit of, you knew me when I was that age, Josh, so you could attest. I was a little bit of, a troublemaker. And so I think I remember kind of teasing Jeff, like, okay, I'll read your touchy-feely book. The book changed my life.
Welcome to Waking Up to Life with Rabbi Josh, a podcast that is built around conversations with friends and people in the community who have found a bit of enlightenment in their lives. While the events that we're going to talk about may not seem life-changing, I think the conversation will reveal how these moments have shaped the world in which my guests live. This informal conversation and insights from Jewish tradition may change your life as well. And if not, it's just 18 minutes with me. So, l'chaim, to life. On today's podcast, we welcome my dear friend, Doug Passon. Doug is an attorney living in Phoenix, Arizona, who has spent his life working to make the lives of his clients better. Specifically, in recent years, he's moved his law practice from a traditional law practice and public defense to a practice that specializes in sentencing advocacy with sentencing mitigation videos. So as both an attorney and a filmmaker, it is really exciting to reconnect to an old friend, Doug. It's so good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's great to be here.
So we've talked about your career, the shift from public defense to filmmaking and the sentencing mitigation videos that you are creating on a daily basis. But we've really never talked about how you got there. And different from some of my guests, your story today is about a moment that was shaped for you because of a book you read. So tell us the story. How did you have your waking up to life moment?
Okay, so I'm going to start with a quote from Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell is, hopefully people know, are familiar with him, but he is a story master. And he wrote The Hero with a Thousand Faces and The Hero's Journey and all. Is one of my great heroes in life. And he has a very well-known quote that says, "Follow your bliss, and the universe will open doors where there were once only walls." And so when I was getting ready for this podcast, it was kind of daunting to think of what are these moments in life that sort of jarred me awake. And what I started to sort of figure out about myself is I feel like, yes, I've had periods in my life where I have been on autopilot and not living in the now, but I have tried for so long to develop a discipline of being awake, being in the moment, in the now. And so I started thinking about, where did that come from? And my earliest memory was probably early college. My best friend since we were 12, Jeff, made me read this book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. Now, I was a little bit of, you knew me when I was that age, Josh, so you could attest. I was a little bit of, a troublemaker. And so I think I remember kind of teasing Jeff, like, okay, I'll read your touchy-feely book. The book changed my life. And there was a follow-up book that was more of a, let's put this all into practice. And that really, really rocked me. It was called No Ordinary Moments. And that's what stuck with me for the whole journey, which is the idea that there is magic and miracle everywhere, all the time. And we just have to open up and be awake to see it. And he said, even, you just use the example, putting on your pair of pants, that you can find the extraordinary in these seemingly ordinary moments. You just have to be looking for it. You have to be awake, and kind of have the courage to go out there and live your life and follow your path, no matter what the expectations are on, that other people want to put on you or society wants to put on you. Be awake, do your thing, and it's all going to work out.
It's amazing to hear you talk about it because that book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, at probably the exact same time came into my life. And I just want to play off of what you said there, because one of the coolest moments in the book is this effort of one of the characters to figure out how to jump over a fully grown stalk of corn. And of course, nobody can start from scratch and just jump over a 6 foot tall stalk of corn. But if every day as the corn is growing, you make that leap over the top of the corn, you will be developing the skill sets to be able to make the jump ultimately when the corn is at its full growth. For me, what was so powerful about that was the idea of incremental change. And like you said, it's not something that has happened when you read the book or in that moment, but over a course of a lifetime, applying the lessons that have been so powerful. So how have you applied them? Where has it taken you in your life? How did it change your career?
Yeah, it's definitely a discipline, right? And it makes me think of Judaism. Really, that's what we're doing. Like it's also aspirational, this discipline. Um, but so I think the earliest moment I can remember is I wanted it was law school, and I was trying to figure out what the next steps were. And most of my colleagues were, working at big firms and making a lot of money, and I wanted to be a public defender. And so I moved out to Phoenix with no job and, got a job for $32,000 a year. And I was happy. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And, you know, I, here's another thing, because the whole way through there's two tracks for me, and that can't I can't let this go unspoken, which is it was either going to be law school or film school for me. So when I talk about, I've already dropped Joseph Campbell on you, but from the earliest my earliest memory is story was my saving grace. Going to the movies, going into a dark theater, being transported, rooting for the good guy and whatever. It was so ingrained in my soul that we're, that we are our stories are what move us and shape us and make us see the world in a different way. So I went to law school, but I always kept the love of story, and I made movies on the side and everything else. But the reason I'm saying this is because, I followed my bliss. My parents, who bless their heart, love them to death. They finance, my education in a very significant way, as did, you know, uh, my ancestors. I'm very grateful to have those gifts in my life. But my father, who spent his whole career in the business world, really had a hard time understanding why I would go A, work for peanuts after spending all that money on law school, and B, I think more importantly, why do you want to defend those people? Like, why do you want to spend your day with criminals and swim in those such dark waters? And I never really found the best way to explain that to him. But then, very shortly after I was working as a public defender, my dad actually called me, and he said, "I got to tell you, I just watched a movie. It's called Murder in the First." And I don't know if you've seen that, but it's Kevin Bacon. It's based on a true story where an inmate in Alcatraz murders another inmate, and a young public defender has to defend him. But there is no defense. He's guilty. He did it in the mess hall in front of 200 witnesses.
Right.
But there was a reason, there was a mitigation, there was a story there, and which is Alcatraz put him in solitary for 3 years in violation of all their rules and policies and laws, and he went nuts. And he got out, and the moment he got back into the general population, he saw the guy that ratted him out and put him in solitary and went nuts and killed him. And what this young public defender did was put the system on trial. And it's such a great movie. But my dad said, I watched this movie, and he goes, now I understand. And that was a waking up moment for me, the epiphany of the power of story has to help people see the world through someone else's eyes, and truly, truly like take a journey that they would have never otherwise taken in their life, to come to this level of epiphany and understanding.
And you alluded to it earlier when you talked about Judaism. We are a people where the story matters, right? We sit at
Stories
the Seder
matter.
table. We tell our story over and over again. In fact, we are supposed to sit at the Seder table and participate in these silly rituals that are about making people pay attention, listen, experience. So somehow that has transformed Jewish life over the course of millennia. And I think that you're transforming the lives of people in your family, in your community, and certainly your clients. And I know it's a little bit of a shameless plug for a new book, but you just finished writing and publishing a book called The Narrative Gym for Law, which is about a particular process called the ABT process. I talk about that and what that means in terms of sentencing mitigation for you and why making that story important is so powerful.
So ABT, I won't go too deep into it, but it was developed by a brilliant guy named Dr. Randy Olson, Harvard-trained scientist who went to film school, and his mission was to bring storytelling into the science world because, like lawyers, scientists, we're data-driven, and sometimes the story element gets lost. So what this is just a simple framework for narrative communication. And so, I've mentioned Campbell. Campbell's got a story framework that's 17 steps, and it's very complicated and it's hard for people to understand. So I've been trying for years to find a way to easily teach lawyers how do we construct stories. And so it's not what the story is going to be about, it's about how we tell it. It's about form, not content. And the ABT stands for and, but, and therefore, and those are the three central elements of all good narrative. So I'll leave it there. But it's good, and it's not just my book is for law, but Randy has. There's 4 books in this series, which is really cool because it's for all of life, right? We are all our stories, and so the first one is just a general one, the narrative gym. There's one for business. Mine is for law. They just came out with one for politics. There's a whole series of them. The takeaway is narrative is everything.
Yeah, we need the ABT, the narrative gym for clergy, right? We need to teach each other how to say our stories. So I want to ask you then, and I don't, again, you don't want to go too deeply into ABT, but what is the and that drives your living your bliss? What is that and piece for your personal story?
So I think that, oh, well, so let me see here. What is the and that drives my personal bliss? My, huh. Well, I think I have one word. I think I have one word that sort of guides me in all of my life, but especially my practice, and it's empathy. Um, I just think the world would be a much better place all around if there was more empathy. In other words, we live our lives based on our own experience, and we make judgments about how things are supposed to be and what other people are doing and what other people are saying based just on our own lens of experience. We don't often say, I need to step out of my own experience and into their world and see everything through their eyes to really understand where the other person is coming from. And that's what allows us to otherize other people. They're not me. They're not like me.
And
Um,
isn't that, I mean, I have to be the rabbi here. Isn't that exactly the power of the Shema, right? We call it the watchword of our faith, but the Shema is about listening, not just hearing words, but
mhm,
actually allowing those words to deeply enter our soul, to really pay attention to
mhm,
other in the world. That is who we are as Jewish people, right?
mhm. Listening, absolutely listening and looking. And when we talk about our stories and Torah and Exodus and Passover, that's the thing that strikes me so much about the story of Passover is this idea of seeing. Moses saw. The burning bush. I was taught. You tell me, because you're the rabbi. But the interesting part of that story isn't that the bush was on fire. It's that he looked closely enough to realize that the bush was on fire, but it wasn't burning up. It wasn't being consumed. that there was something magical happening in that moment, right?
Yeah.
And when he sees, Moses is my favorite public defender in the Bible because, well, he took the law into his own hands. So, we can have a debate about that. But he sees injustice in the form of a soldier beating a slave, and he sees that, and he doesn't walk by it. He's moved so deeply that he takes action. And he gives one of the greatest closing arguments, I think, in the history of the world in the desert when God is so mad about the golden calf and everything else. He's about to end the whole project, right? God's going to kill everybody, right? And Moses gives this great closing argument. And so he mitigated the damage. But back to your thing, yes, hearing, listening, looking, seeing, and the Shema for me, the most powerful word in there is one. And I know that it says the Lord is one and it's talking about one God, but for me, it's talking about that we are all one. We're all connected. And someone else can't be suffering around me without it having some impact on me. You don't feel it necessarily. You don't want to feel it. You're closed off to it, but we are all connected. And I got to say, if that's the one lesson that we learned from COVID, for me, that's it. We're all connected. Everything, everybody else, the choices they make, the air we breathe, everything affects us and everyone around us. We got to take care of each other.
It's so true. And it's something, if we don't learn very quickly, I think we are in trouble for future generations. But I want to play on something. You said something really interesting to me. I talked about listening. You transitioned that to looking or seeing. And I can't help but wonder if that has driven your dream of being a filmmaker. If there's something about not just telling the story, but seeing the story that
Yeah,
also matters. Is that part of it for you?
100%. Oh, 100%. And now there's science behind it, mirror neurons. And it says if we can actually see something, we start to become the other. We start to feel what we're seeing. But yeah, 100%. There's brain science behind it. There's also brain science behind story. Our brain reacts to story. But 100%. We lawyers especially, we love our words. We love to hear ourselves talk, and we hear from the witnesses on the witness stand. It's all about words and listening. And my whole mission has been to say, no, 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 no. We've got to look. We have to see, because when you can see, first of all, it's credibility. It's seeing is believing, right?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and in its connection, it's that empathy piece. And well, I lost my last train of thought, but 100% movies are it. And that has been my goal, to transform the whole practice in that way. So by the way, I'm not just making movies for cases. We don't do those in every cases. We do them in particular ones that are just right for it. But if I'm doing a traditional legal pleading, which is just words, no, 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 I'm sticking pictures in there,
Right.
you
So
know?
it obviously it matters in the way clergy tell our stories. It matters in the way attorneys tell our story. It obviously matters in the way everybody tells stories. How I want to drive this home in terms of the practical. What does this storytelling process mean for everyday life? How are you using that tool to be a better dad, to be a better husband, to be a better friend?
Wow. I hope that I am using that tool, but I mean, I do see everything through the lens of story. And I think that just in terms of the way that we communicate, I'll give you the and, but therefore, a lot of times we just communicate in the and, which is just delivering a bunch of data and information. I always, in the book and in law, my main example is the Miranda rights. Everybody knows them, right? We've heard them a million times, but what's the spin? What's the problem? What's the but? The but is we all know our rights, but we never exercise them. 90% of my clients throw those rights out the window and agree to speak with the police. And sometimes even confess to crimes they didn't even do, believe it or not.
So what's the therefore in that?
The therefore in that is that we need to change the way we deliver Miranda. So the therefore is the conclusion. But if the Miranda is all and, you have the right to remain silent, and you have the right to an attorney, and if you can't afford one, we'll get you one, and you can stop. That's when you communicate in that way, it's in one ear and out the other. So then the and is important because it sets the stage, but you must have the but. And the but is in every single movie, it's the inciting incident. It's the thing that you leave this ordinary world and set off on this big adventure. It's the problem that you're trying to solve. Dorothy gets swept away in a tornado, and that's a big problem. That's a big but. She's in her ordinary world in Kansas, but a tornado happens. Therefore, she's got to get back home. And the therefore is the meaning that we infuse in stories and in life. Therefore, she learns there's no place like home. She was bored in this mundane life, and she had to go out on this great big journey to realize, no, this seemingly ordinary mundane life that I lead is everything. And she had to take that journey to figure it out.
And isn't that exactly the way we should be interacting with people in our lives? We should hear the ands and understand the buts of our children, because the therefore is the development of a better relationship, right?
Yeah.
It can't just be with this, here are the rules. There
Yeah.
also has to be an understanding of their circumstance in life and what they're experiencing. Therefore, let's solve these challenges together. Let's be a family in a different, unique, better way. It's amazing. I think that obviously the ABT concept it applies to everything in life, and I can't help but say it applies in the Jewish world as well, right?
Yeah.
We can't just do the commandments, the mitzvot. That's a very traditional way of seeing things. There's also the but I'm living in this modern world. Therefore, Reform Judaism is the synthesis of the and buts of the Jewish world. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
By the way, you just hit on another version of the ABT because it's based on all these story traditions woven into one. But Hegel is thesis, antithesis, and synthesis.
Of course.
And that's exactly what you just did, right?
Well, we were taught that in rabbinic school. That's how we were taught to write every good sermon.
But that's the ABT expressed in a different way. But it's the same. It's all the same story over and over again. The hero's journey, all of it. And you also hit on a huge thing because this idea of incorporating the ABT and the narrative in the way that you interact with people, especially our kids, what it does is it allows you to be an active listener. So where you're not just going, okay, great kid. Thanks for sharing. But I'm hearing that what you're saying is this, therefore, what should we, how can I help you? What should we do about this? But it's a way to engage in a way that takes us off of autopilot and, to use your words, to wake us up to what's happening, to put us right in the moment, to understand there's meaning there. We just have to figure out what it is.
All right. So that was a perfect lead into, we're unfortunately nearing the end of this conversation. What is the ultimate takeaway for you when it comes to living your bliss and your waking up moment? What do you want my listeners to hear you tell them as a practical next step to achieving what you seem to have come closer to achieving in your lifetime?
Well, first of all, don't let the tragedies be the things that wake you up, because that's usually when we have these moments, when we go through these extremely difficult periods in life. But craft that discipline to try to be awake in the ordinary moments. Don't wait for the bad stuff to slap you in the face. Don't live your life on autopilot. Good stories, I think, end up where they begin. So maybe I could take it back to Dan Millman, which, one of the great things that resonated with me in the way the Peaceful Warrior was he talks about the secret to happiness. And he says it's not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less, which I think hints at the no ordinary moments aspect very much. So leads to that. And I think for material pursuits, that's wise words. For spiritual pursuits, I would say the exact opposite is true. Always look for more moments of connection, moments of empathy, moments of pursuing your passion. And I guess I'll take it one step further because um, in the book we talk about boiling your story down to the one thing, and we I call it Curly's Law, and takes us to the remember the movie City Slickers,
Of course.
And Curly is with Billy Crystal's character, and he tells him the secret to life. And do you remember what he says?
I don't.
He just holds up his gloved hand and he says, "It's that one thing. That's the secret to life." And Billy Crystal says, "Well, what is it?" And he said, "You got to figure that out for yourself." For me, professionally, it's been in the law, it's been story, it's been using story to help my clients, and that's been my bliss. And every time I feel like I'm getting off course in my life or in my professional life, I bring it back to that one thing and it sets me right.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing to hear you be able to synthesize a whole career into that personal one experience. I really appreciate that. So we ended with the book, and actually that's a perfect ending, because with all of my guests, I have been inviting you to share with our listeners something completely off topic. Is there a recommendation of a television show, a book, something that you are watching or reading right now that that you would recommend? Obviously, everybody should read Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Everybody should read the Narrative Gym for Law, which you can buy
Or at
on
least some
Amazon.
iteration of the narrative, Jim. It doesn't have to be the law one, but
Right,
if
right.
you're into law, go for it.
But
Thank you.
what are you reading right now? What are you watching right now that has sort of made you rethink the world?
Oh my gosh. Well, so first of all, because I'm a creature of story, I'm reading and watching and listening to a million things at once. But I will tell you what just rocked my world: Six Ways to Sunday. This past weekend, so Sidney Poitier recently passed, and didn't never saw a lot of those movies. So I went back to an old classic, which is Guess Who's Coming to Dinner,
Hmm.
and I watched that movie on Saturday. Cried through half of it because it was so beautiful and so sad and so well done. But it's in 1967 is this movie. It is so relevant to today and what's happening in our world. And well, so much has changed since the 60s. So much has stayed the same, maybe even gotten worse. But the Poitier's a genius. Katharine Hepburn, Spencer Tracy. You can't go wrong. I think it's on Stars right now, but that's my recommendation. Guess who's coming to dinner?
Outstanding, outstanding. Doug, it is such a joy for us to be able to be in these moments. This is something that certainly the pandemic has alerted us to, this idea that we can actually be visually in contact and connected even from across the country. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Rabbi Josh. This was awesome. I really appreciate you and this and everything you do.
So for all of our listeners, I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about storytelling today and understanding our place in the world. It is really exciting to have you listening and watching the podcast. I hope that you will join us in future episodes. And until then, I hope you will continue to wake up to life.